بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه ثم أما بعد. To proceed, today inshallah we will have the chapter of al-Sadaq, and this is as you all know a chapter of al-Umdat, Kitab al-Umdat. It's an abridged manual of Hanbali Fiqh written by Imam ibn Qudamah al-Maqdisi rahimahullah, who died in the year 620 after Hijrah. So he says here under Kitab al-Sadaq, which he calls the book of Sadaq, and as I told you before, when they call it book, they mean it's large in size. It's larger than being just a bab. It's not necessarily that they divided the book into books and then abwab, chapters. So the book may not have any abwab. It may just be another chapter under the book of marriage. It's another chapter, but because it is larger in size than the rest of the chapters, he calls it Kitab, book, the book of Sadaq, or Kitab al-Sadaq. So this is just to alert you that this chapter is unlike other chapters. It is bigger, it's important, and it's bigger. Kitab al-Sadaq, the book of Sadaq, or the wedding gift. Now, the word Sadaq itself, the root word, the three-lettered word, where this comes from, reminds you of something, right? Right? Sad, Dal, Qaf, reminds you of something. Sadaqah, which is said the truth, means in the past tense, it said, spoke the truth. So, Sadq is truthfulness, the verbal noun. Sadq is truthfulness. So what is the relationship between Sadaq and Sadq? It is basically a show of genuineness, a show of commitment, a show of genuine commitment to the spouse. So when someone proposes, when someone gets married, they pay that Sadaq, not in return for, or not as a compensation. And even though, if some of our earlier scholars used suboptimal terminology to define Sadaq as a compensation, this usage, we're not bound by it, because we're bound by the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. That is al-Wahy. And we love and respect our scholars, and we find excuses for them all the time. We honor the bearers of the tradition, but we are not bound by the expressions of the bearers of tradition all the time. And people who do apologetics and feel that they need to defend everything that was said by every scholar in the last 1400 years, that is basically completely mistaken, completely misguided sort of approach. What we need to do is we need to preserve the honor of the bearers of the tradition, all of them, regardless of your agreement with them. Regardless of your agreement with them, just respect them, show them the respect and love that is due to the Imams of this deen. But again, at the same time, you don't need to accept everything they said. You don't need to bind yourself to their expressions. We are bound by their agreement. But when it comes to expressions in particular, because, at the level of expressions should be cognizant of the surrounding culture. So there are expressions, techniques, and subject matter. The subject matter of this deen we will not change. The flexibility of al-ahkam is not changed in the subject matter. It is basically flexible response to circumstantial variables. It's not a change in the subject matter. The subject matter of the deen will not change. And then the techniques of basically da'wah and so on, these can have some changes. The language, the expressions, the rhetoric, it should basically it should be cognizant of, sensitive to the culture and the language of the people. So when you say sadaq is compensation, and sometimes they would say sadaq is compensation for, they would be a little bit more explicit, or not explicit, but a little bit more, anyway. They just wanted they wanted basically to make this contract comparable to other types of transactions. It's a mu'amala, it's a transaction, and here is a contract. So they wanted to apply basically the sort of the same understanding or conception of a contract. There is like something that is being given in exchange for something else. But they did recognize as well that sadaq is not even a condition of validity in the contract. This is not a contract of mu'awada in that sense. It's not a contract of trade, exchange of benefits in that sense, because sadaq is not even a condition of validity. Yes, it is wajib, but is it a condition of validity? It's not. It's not even, so it's not that it is not only a pillar, because in the other forms of contracts, the iwad, the price, is one of the pillars, not the conditions of validity. It is part of the essence, the subject matter of the contract. But sadaq is not a pillar. It is not even a condition of validity. Like you could have a marriage without sadaq. Yes, it is obligatory, but what if you have a marriage without sadaq? وَإِن طَلَّقْتُمُوهُنَّ مِن قَبْلِ أَن تَمَسُّوهُنَّ أَوْ تَفْرِضُوا لَهُنَّ فَرِيضَةً. And if you divorce them before you touch them, or you designate a mahr for them, or you designate a gift for them, so clearly you could do this, and the marriage would be valid. So sadaq basically is a show of commitment. It comes from sidq, it comes from truthfulness. So this is the husband's the husband's show of genuineness or genuine commitment to this relationship. Therefore, sadaq is not meant to be like negligible. It's really not meant to be negligible. And we do say أعظمهن بركة أيسرهن مؤنة خير النكاح أيسر. We say that the best marriage is that which is easiest, or the best, or أعظمهن بركة, the most blessed of women is basically أيسرهن مؤنة. That will not cost much, or sort of like affordable. But what does that mean? Does that mean that the sadaq is just negligible? And some people would say, well, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Iltamis walau khataman min hadid," seek even a ring of iron. So sadaq could be anything. But when did he say "Iltamis walau khataman min hadid"? When did he say this? He said this when a man came to him, and a woman was basically offering herself to the Prophet ﷺ, proposing to the Prophet ﷺ, and he did not want to marry her. And a man came to him and he said, if you have no interest in her, marry her off to me. Give her to me in marriage. So the Prophet ﷺ, knowing that the woman wants to marry, not forcing it on her, but knowing that the woman wants to marry, he said, he told them, what do you have? He said, I have ridai. He said, or izari. He said, well, if you give her your izar, you sit down without izar. That doesn't make sense. And so the Prophet ﷺ, in that context, the Prophet ﷺ told them, "Iltamis walau khataman min hadid," seek even a ring of iron, just to show that you are serious about it, that show some commitment. And then when when the man was not able to find even a ring of iron, he gave, he married him by the Quran that he has, or he told him, like, do you remember anything of the Quran? And it is understood from that context that teaching her what he knows of the Quran was going to be her sadaq, even though in the Hanbali madhab authorized position, you can teach the Quran as sadaq, and they do have, we have our own explanation basically as to why we don't recognize teaching the Quran as sadaq. We may come to it later. But teaching the Quran according to the earlier Hanafis, not the later Hanafis, but according to the earlier Hanafis and the Hanbalis, is something that you don't take compensation for because it's only qurba. It's something that you do for the sake of Allah. It's an act of devotion only. It's not something that you take compensation for. Now, most of the contemporary scholars would say that teaching the Quran is something you could take compensation for, and that is because it is almost ahkam al-darura. It is almost basically rulings at times of necessity, because if we say otherwise, the Quran itself will be lost and people will not be teaching the Quran because Bayt al-Mal is not basically supporting the teachers of the Quran anymore, so that we could say we will have some support for them. So, but anyway, so sadaq then is not meant to be trivial. It's not meant to be negligible in amount. It is meant to be a show of commitment or a show of your sidq or your genuineness and your commitment to this relationship. So how much approximately would sadaq be? Well, how much was the sadaq of the Prophet ﷺ to his wives? Umar radiallahu anhu, and this was reported also from Aisha, said that the sadaq of the Prophet ﷺ to his wives and the sadaq that he took for his daughters never exceeded 12 uqiyya. 12 uqiyya. And Aisha said 12 and a half. Aisha said that it never exceeded 12 uqiyya. Or 12 uqiyya, which would be 12, one nashjan. Nash is half an uqiyya. So Aisha said 12 and a half, Umar said 12. It's about the same thing. One uqiyya is 40 dirhams of silver. So this would be 480. This would be 500. So 500 dirhams of silver, that was the Prophet's sadaq. But could it be more? Yes, Habiba got 4,000. Do you know why? Because the Najashi gave her the 4,000. So it's, she got a little more. On behalf of the Prophet ﷺ, Najashi gave her like 4,000. But the Prophet ﷺ was even-handed even in his Mahr to his azwaj, which is not a requirement. You don't, like if someone is married to more than one woman, it is not a requirement. You could marry a princess, and Mahr al-Misr, the Mahr of her equals, you could marry a princess and a peasant. You will not pay the same Mahr to them because Mahr al-Misr is not the same. But if you can be even-handed, that's good. If they will accept that even-handedness, that is good, because that is what the Prophet ﷺ did. So aside from Habiba, he was even-handed even in his Mahr. But after you marry the princess and the peasant, the sustenance has to be equal. You basically have to maintain the same standard of living for both of them. But the Mahr does not have to be equal. But anyway, so the Prophet ﷺ was even-handed even in his Mahr. He would give about 500 dirhams. So what is 500 dirhams? If you say 500 silver coins in our time, this would be really not much. It would be a small amount, but this is not how we do it. This is not how we do it. We have to estimate the buying power, the purchasing power of the 500. And how do we estimate the purchasing power of the 500? And you will find all of this written, so don't worry about writing because I sent you the document. So we will. So how do we estimate the purchasing power of 1 dirham during the time of the Prophet ﷺ? The way the scholars usually do this is by the diya. It is basically the blood money. The blood money is what? 100 camels, 1,000 dinars, 10,000 dirhams, 2,000 sheep. Dirhams, dinars, camels. So you could have a sense of the purchasing power of dinar. So then 1 dinar is about 10 dirhams, 10 to 12. It's a matter of disagreement, 10 to 12. Let's say 10, simplify things, 10 dirhams. So 1 dinar is 10 dirhams. So 1 dinar, 10 dinars will buy you 1 camel, right? 100 dirhams will buy you 1 camel. 1 dinar will buy you 2 sheep. 1 dinar will buy you 2 sheep, right? 1 dinar is how many dirhams? 10 dirhams, 2 sheep. Okay. So, do you know the hadith of Urwa al-Bariqi? Hadith Urwa al-Bariqi, where he went to the Prophet ﷺ gave him 1 dirham to buy a sheep, and he went and bought one, and then on his way back he sold it for 2. He bought it for 1 dinar, sold it for 2 dinars, went back and bought the Prophet ﷺ another sheep for 1 dinar, and came back and gave the Prophet ﷺ the 1 dinar and the sheep. And then the Prophet ﷺ, made dua for him to bless his transactions. So what do we get from that hadith? 1 dinar, 1 sheep, and 2 dinars, 1 sheep, right? So, okay. So if 2 dinars, 1 sheep, if 2 dinars, 1 sheep, how much can 1 dinar get? Half a sheep. Huh? I'm saying if 2 dinars is can buy you 1 sheep, 1 dinar can buy you half. مش عروة ibn Bajad al-Bariqi, he bought the sheep for 1 dinar and he sold it for 2 dinars. So 2 dinars, 1 sheep. If 2 dinars will buy 1 sheep, then 1 dinar buys half, right? Okay. So from here to here, then we can say that 1 dinar buys you anywhere from half to 2. From half to 2. So 10 dirhams can buy you anywhere from 2 sheep to half. So what is 500 then? 500 is can buy you how many now? 25 to 100. 25 to 100 sheep. At the higher price, it will buy you 25 sheep. At the lowest price, it will buy you 100 sheep. Yeah. Let us take 50, somewhere in the middle. Let's take 50 sheep. So the Sadaq of the Prophet ﷺ was about 50 sheep. That was substantial in their time. This was a time of scarcity, and they had very little means. 50 sheep is a wealth that was substantial during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Really substantial during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. What?
I say it's around $2,000. So we're saying it's in those days, not how much this time. It's the best
No.
in those days.
50 sheep is around $2,000 now? How much is 50 sheep now? Huh? 15,000? Okay. But what we're trying to, okay. What we're trying to do here, don't be too literal about it. We're just getting the gist of it. We're trying to understand that the Mahr was substantial. The Mahr was substantial. It was not, basically negligible or trivial amount of money, because if we're saying it is called Sadaq, a show of commitment, it is substantial. But you have to take everything in consideration. Like if there is a student, for instance, or someone who just finished college and he doesn't have much and he is showing commitment and whatever he has, he is showing commitment. He's working hard to show his commitment. Then you certainly don't hold them to any sort of abstract standard in your mind. You'll have to come down and contextualize it. This is a student in college, or this is someone who just got out of college. You will have to contextualize. But the point is that it is substantial because it is a show of genuineness and commitment. That's all. Okay. Can you do some mu'akhar, which is deferred, and some, yes, you could do mu'akhar. You could do mu'akhar. And you could basically advance part of it and defer part of it. How much you advance and how much you defer is up to the bride. She can determine how much to advance and how much to defer. Now, if you say this is deferred, in a culture where deferred dowry becomes the only hal or due upon divorce or death, then that's what will apply. If you say this is deferred until a certain point, until a certain time, then it is fine. If you say, my mahr is, but don't exaggerate. We're going to say this just as an example. My mahr, for instance, is $50,000. 5,000 in advance. Don't do this, but I'm just saying. Giving examples here. 5,000 in advance, and then 5,000 each year for 9 years. Can you do that? Yes, you can do that. You could defer whatever you want. You could basically advance, whatever. The division is up to the bride. She can determine how much. Certainly, أعظمهن بركة, أيسرهن مؤنة. خير النكاح أيسر. The best nikah is the affordable one. And Umar ibn Khattab even said that a man, الرجل يثقل لامرأته في صدقتها حتى يقول لها قد كلفت إليك علق القربة. So a man would continue, would give his, would exaggerate in the sadaq until he becomes resentful and says to his wife, you cost me everything, even the hanging string of the water skin. The hanging string of the water skin. I had to sell everything I own to marry you. You cost me so much. Causes resentment. So we have to understand that this is not a price, that this is just a show of commitment. So if it is obvious, the commitment is obvious, and they are showing their commitment within their means, then that is what we need to accept. Show their commitment within their context, within their means, and so on. But again, at the same time, for the brothers, they have to understand that it is not something negligible. It is really a show of commitment.
If he divorces before the payment, then it's due immediately, right?
All of this is coming now. This is Kitab al-Sadaq. This is the book of Sadaq. We didn't even get to start. We didn't begin to read. But the Sheikh said here, كل ما جاز أن يكون ثمنا جاز أن يكون صداقا قليلا كان أو كثيرا لقول رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم للذي قال له زوجني هذه المرأة إن لم يكن لك بها حاجة التمس ولو خاتما من حديد. Anything that is lawful to be a compensation is lawful to be a sadaq, whether it is large or small. This is because of a statement of the Prophet ﷺ, or the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, to the man who asked him to marry him to a certain woman. If the Messenger of Allah ﷺ himself was not interested in marrying her, seek something for a dower. I'm using dowry and dowry. There is an explanation in the book why I prefer sadaq over dowry because of connotations. You know, it's not a morning gift. It is not a price of the bride. Sadaq is a better word to use, but just for simplicity. Seek something for a dowry, even a ring of iron. So anything that could be a compensation could be a mahr. What does he mean by this? He means that the same thing that will apply to a sale contract, something that could be a compensation, a price for a commodity, could be a mahr. And that is where the idea of commodity and price and compensation is coming from, because they wanted to define what a mahr is. So they wanted to say that a mahr has to be a valid compensation in a sale contract, with some exceptions, that they would allow a little bit more gharar in mahr than they would in a sale contract, because in mahr there is something that we can fall back on. If he says, you know, I will get you this once if I find it, and he doesn't find it, what happens? She gets mahr al-mithl, the mahr of her equals. The mahr of her equals. So there is a default that we can fall back on all the time when it comes to mahr. So a little bit more gharar may be allowed, but a lot of gharar is not allowed in mahr. So, you know, your mahr is whatever is in this box, not allowed. Okay. This is not allowed because that is gharar, that is, you know, not acceptable gharar. Okay. So insects cannot be a mahr. Nothing, you know, it has to be useful. It has to be useful. It has to be a compensation in a contract, useful. Gharar, extreme gharar, unknown mahr is not allowed. Also, the Hanbali said it cannot be so trivial that it cannot be divided by two. So one fils is not allowed. Anyway, but the point here is that the mahr should be something that could be a compensation. Can it be a service? Can it be usufruct, service, something of that nature? Yes, because a usufruct, the use of of this apartment, for instance, or the use of this whatever, the usufruct. It could be a compensation in a contract, yes. It could be a mahr. Could it be a service? A service could be a compensation in a contract, yes. I will teach you Sahih Muslim. Is this a mahr? Well, it's controversial in the madhab because in the madhab they also say teaching Sahih Muslim has to be a qurba like the Quran. But anyway, but yes, according to one position in the madhab, yes, and according to the majority, yes. You know, other than the Quran, teaching fiqh, teaching hadith, teaching math, teaching astronomy, teaching anatomy, teaching anything could be a mahr, because that service could be a valid compensation. And then they have it's a long discussion about, you know, because what if he taught her and then he divorced her before the consummation? How can he take half of the knowledge back? He would actually demand half of half of the ujrat al-ta'lim, half of the half. No, but it is it's.
No, she doesn't have the money.
He already taught her the stuff, and she demanded it. She should understand that whenever she gets the mahr, she should understand, whatever the mahr is, she should understand that she's liable for half of it if consummation does not take place. If consummation does not take place and divorce takes place before consummation, she's liable for half of it. So maybe she like if they agreed on 10 classes, maybe she should take 5 only before consummation, so that she would not be in debt. But anyway, so you get the point here. The point is that the mahr has to be a valid compensation. Cannot be unknown, it cannot be useless, and it can be a usufruct or it can be a service. فإذا زوج الرجل ابنته بأي صداق كان جاز ولا ينقصها غير الأب من مهر مثلها إلا برضاها. It is valid for a man to give his daughter in marriage for any sadaq other than the father. No one is allowed to give her in marriage for less than the sadaq of her equals, except with her permission. Except with her permission. Why is it that the father can't marry her for less than the mahr of her equals? Because as we said before, the father has so much compassion that if he were to do that, he would be doing it in the best interest of his daughter. Like if someone proposed to her, like a student who just finished college, for instance, proposed to her, and every one of her sisters got, like, let us say $5,000, whatever the number. I'm not using numbers here to suggest anything for anybody. You know, I'm just using numbers just as numbers. No, keep in mind, not suggesting anything for anybody from here or here. So he said every one of her sisters got $5,000. And this guy came out of college and he doesn't have the $5,000, so her father decided to accept $2,000 as a dowry for her. He would be, if he may be doing this in her best interest. Let us say she's an orphan, her father is not around, her uncle decided to get her married. He cannot accept $5,000 except with her permission. She agreed, yes. Her father can tell her, can force her to take the $2,000. Basically, that's what they're saying. That's what they're saying. Her father can force her to take the $2,000, which is less than the mahr of her equals, because he sees that this is still in her best interest. Okay. Then, and certainly they would mention that Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib accepted 2 dirhams for his daughter, and Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib min ashrafi Quraysh nasaban wa ilman wa dinan. So Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib accepted 2 dirhams only for his daughter because the guy was his student, was the student of Sa'id. So he didn't have the means to pay more, so he accepted 2 dirhams. But he saw the nobility of the student and the smartness of the student. There was something that made Sa'id accept 2 dirhams, as a dowry for his daughter. No.
Sorry, when the Prophet ﷺ, he said he allowed him to, an iron ring basically as the mahr for that woman. And it seems like he would have been willing to accept the izar if he had an extra izar. The only reason he said no is because he wouldn't have an izar.
Correct.
So what do we say that, is this basically meant from the laws of the Prophet ﷺ that he could have done that if he wanted to marry her for less than permission?
I think that it was going to be with her permission. Because she was wahiba nafsaha aslan. She was giving herself to the Prophet ﷺ in marriage without a mahr. Like, she didn't really care. She just wanted to marry. So the idea here is that the wali, if the wali is not the father, the wali can still have her married for less than the equal sort of dowry, or the dowry of her equals, with her permission. So for that lady, she would probably be okay. She was okay at the end for just the Quran, sort of Quran classes, and which is certainly greater than anything. But the point here is, no one other than the father will marry her for less than the mahr of her equals without her permission. Then the Sheikh said, فصل وإن تزوجها بغير صداق صح فإن طلقها قبل الدخول لم يكن لها إلا المتعة على الموسع قدره وعلى المقتر قدره وأعلاها خادم وأدناها كسوة يجوز لها الصلاة فيها. Subsection. If he marries her without a sadaq, the marriage is valid. If he divorces her before the consummation, she's entitled only to the mut'ah, which is gift of consolation, which should be proportionate to the wealth or the poverty of the husband. The highest mut'ah is a servant, and the lowest is a garment in which she can pray, So, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا جناح عليكم إن طلقتم النساء ما لم تمسوهن أو تفرضوا لهن فريضة ومتعوهن على الموسع قدره وعلى المقتر قدره متاعا بالمعروف حقا على المحسنين وإن طلقتموهن من قبل أن تمسوهن وقد فرضتم لهن فريضة فنصف ما فرضتم إلا أن يعفون أو يعفو الذي بيده عقدة النكاح وأن تعفوا أقرب للتقوى ولا تنسوا الفضل بينكم إن الله بما تعملون بصير. So in these verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, there will be no basically reproach or blame on you if you divorce women, or liability, reproach, blame, or liability on you if you divorce women, if you did not touch them, which we will talk about later. What does that mean? Khalwa. It means intercourse. Abdullah ibn Abbas said touching in the Quran means intercourse. But is it only intercourse? What about seclusion? And we will see that in the madhab, seclusion will also make the entire mahr incumbent. We will see also that in the madhab, touching with shahwa will make the entire mahr, with lustful touching will make the entire mahr incumbent. We will also see in the madhab that even if he kissed her in the presence of people, that makes the entire mahr incumbent. Without seclusion, without consummation, anything, they consider that to be consummation. But then, من قبل أن تمسوهن, before you touch them, or designate a farida for them, designate a dowry for them. ومتعوهن, so give them a gift of consolation. على الموسع قدره, everyone according to their means. The wealthy according to their means, and the poor according to their means. متاعا بالمعروف حقا على المحسنين, an obligation on the good doers. An obligation on the good doers. Now, this means what? That concept of mut'ah. Mut'ah means enjoyment, right? So, but it means here like a gift of consolation, to make her up, to compensate her for the fact that, the marriage did not basically not go through or proceed. So, a gift of consolation. So that gift of consolation, which is mut'ah, in this ayah, the mut'ah was for a woman who did not have a designated dowry, no designation, no consummation. No designation, no consummation. So no designation, no consummation, mut'a would be obligatory for sure, because that is the exact statement of the ayah.
But the nikah is done already, like
The aqd, the contract. Yes, this is of course after the contract.
But it's not like written in the with the sheikh would ask you when you like go to the.
But yes, the sheikh would ask you what is the dowry. But what if there al-mufawwada or al-mufawwida is the woman who is married without a dowry, after the contract is done, if there is no mention of the dowry, or there is actually a mention of no dowry, we're getting married without dowry, that contract is valid. But then we will not honor that no dowry thing. Because
so it's not when the boy and his father come to the house and like ask for the girl and then they would do the Fatiha. This is not the
no Fatiha, no. We're talking here about after the contract. There is no commitment whatsoever before the contract. All of the discussion is after the contract. So the Sheikh here is talking about the mut'ah and okay, and then he said, and we will come now to talk about any divorcee deserves a mut'ah. This is what we said at Amja because we wanted to figure out sort of, and this would be in accordance with the Hanafi madhab. And there is another report in the Hanbali madhab that would support that every divorcee will be entitled to a mut'ah. The reason here is that we wanted basically to figure out a genuine Sharia compliant solution for the problem of divorce that takes place, like in a country like here, like this one, after 20 years of marriage. Should the woman then go to court to take half of the positions of the man? Should the woman walk away without anything, just with her like suitcase from this marriage if she decided to be a homemaker and basically to do that honorable, noble job of homemaking, to rearing children and all of that stuff. If she decided to do that, should she walk away after 20 years if all of the wealth that has been accumulated or accrued during the marriage goes to the husband because he's the one who's working? What should we do in this case? So at Amja, we felt that a genuine solution that is Sharia compliant from our deen would be that every divorcee is entitled to a mut'ah. In some other verse in the Quran, in the same surah, وَلِلْمُطَلَّقَاتِ مَتَاعٌ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. And for the divorcees is a gift of consolation. And it did not say حَقًّا عَلَى الْمُتَّقِينَ, and it's an obligation upon the muttaqeen. So it did not say in that verse which type of mutallaqat, it just said mutallaqat. So that is where that is what the Hanafis cite in this regard. It's another report in the Hanbali madhab. We found that this report is, that this particular position is a valid position. So anyone after consummation, but we certainly in the we excluded from this the one who has a designated dowry and gets a divorce before consummation, because Allah explicitly said she's entitled to 1/2 of her dowry. So that is excluded. But any woman after consummation, if divorce happens after consummation, she will take a mut'ah. Before consummation, she will take a mut'ah only if there was no designated dowry. If there was designated dowry, she will take half the dowry. If she was no designated dowry, she will take the mut'ah. He said, أَعْلَاهَا خَادِم, a servant, for life. That meant, purchase her a servant for life. And nowadays, just to tell you that أعلاها خادم is very complicated for us to figure out what that means. أدناها kiswa, the lowest mut'a would be to give her kiswa, like an attire in which she can pray. That would cover the entire awra in which she can pray. Now, when we say she was married, like Amja, for instance, when we were talking about the mut'a for women after divorce, after 20 years of marriage, and she was married, so how do we figure out the mut'a? If she goes to court, she'll get half of the man's belongings or possessions or wealth. Should we say she gets nothing? Should we say she gets 1/10? What do? We said that it has to be left to the judgment of that panel that will determine, but it has to be commensurate with several things, including the wealth of the family and the duration of the divorce and the cause of divorce. So if the cause of divorce was ta'assuf from the man, for instance, was basically the man's unwarranted decision to divorce her, then that panel would be a little bit more sort of punitive to the man and give her a larger sum of the wealth of the family because of this, because of his ta'assuf. If it was So different factors. One is the wealth of the family. The other one is the duration of marriage and how much she contributed, how much she devoted and dedicated of her life to this marriage and during the marriage as well. And the third would be the cause of divorce. So that is how we estimate the mut'a. But we have this is not something that is in the madhab, a'laha khadim. This is not something that Allah said or the Prophet ﷺ said. But we still use these guidelines as basically just, we still, it is important for us to go back to our heritage because it is, we will otherwise be floating, in the thin air, not having anything to hold on to, not having any anchorage. So, but we will use this, but keep in mind that it is difficult here to determine what a khadim means. But if you want to say a khadim, that means what nowadays? Like an endowment where you could get enough money to hire a servant? That's a lot of money. Do you know what that means? Like if you want to set up an endowment that will produce enough money to hire a servant. Like let's say the servant will take $2,500 a month. So that is, let us say, $30,000 a year. What is the endowment that will yield $30,000 a year? That's about 1 million. Yeah. So it is not. So the mut'a is not really, when they say a'la khadim, this is not really trivial. But that is the issue of mut'a in general. Keep in mind that in the Hanbali madhab, so that you don't confuse things, I'm bringing Amjad to bring a little bit of contemporary sort of flavor to it, but in the Hanbali madhab, this mut'a is only for women who did not have a designation, did not have consummation. The other report in the Hanbali madhab that is not authorized, and the Hanafi madhab would give it to any divorcee. That is what Amjad took basically to solve the problem of the problem that we just talked about. Okay. Then the Shaykh said, rahimahullah ta'ala, إن مات أحدهما قبل الدخول والفرض فرض لها مهر نسائها لا وكس ولا شطط والباقي منهما الميراث وعليها العدة لأن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قضى في بروع بنت واشق لما مات زوجها ولم يدخل بها ولم يفرض لها أن لها مهر نسائها لا وكس ولا شطط ولها الميراث وعليها العدة. If one of them dies before the consummation, of the marriage and the designation of a sadaq, then she will be entitled to the sadaq of her equals, no more and no less. The survivor will be entitled to inheritance. And if the survivor is the woman, she must observe the iddah. This is because the Prophet ﷺ decreed concerning the case of Barwa bint Washiq, when her husband died before he consummated the marriage with her or designated a sadaq for her, that she was entitled to the sadaq of her equals, no more and no less, that she was entitled to her share of his inheritance, and that she had to observe the iddah. Okay. So, no designation, no consummation, divorce happens, mut'ah is binding. No designation, no consummation, divorce does not happen, but one of them dies, the man or the woman. So, no designation, no consummation, mut'ah in the case of divorce. No designation, no consummation. In the case of death, what do we do now? She got married without designating a dowry, or they may even have said no dowry. We will not honor that. Or they didn't mention the dowry. Okay? So no designation, no consummation. One of them died. What happens in this case? The Mahr becomes incumbent, because the Mahr becomes incumbent upon what? Many things. Lustful touching, kissing in public, seclusion, intercourse, any one of these makes the Mahr incumbent. All of it, entirely. At once. In addition to this, the death of one of them makes the entire Mahr incumbent all at once. So Mahr is incumbent. So Sadaq in its entirety. The other thing is inheritance. They are married. They inherit from each other. The third one is iddah. If he is the one who died, then she will have to observe the iddah. Three things. Abdullah bin Mas'ud made that judgment without knowing that the Prophet ﷺ made it. And when he was told that the Prophet ﷺ made the same judgment about Barwa bint Washiq, he was so happy that his judgment agreed with the judgment of the Prophet ﷺ without even, knowing what the Prophet ﷺ said.
So if she died, the sadaq would go to people who will inherit her. If she dies, yeah, she will her
mahr will go to the people, to her heirs, to warasatiha, to her heirs. So, and then inheritance and iddah. So if he dies, she gets the sadaq. If she dies, she gets the sadaq also, but it will go now to her inheritors. The inheritance, the same applies. Whoever survives the other will inherit. And the iddah, only if he dies, she would have to observe the iddah. Is this clear? Good. How do we determine Mahr al-Mithl? Mahr al-Mithl, the Mahr of her equals. The Mahr of her equals, that equality is equality في الجمال والمال والثيوبة والعلم. It's equality in many parameters. The metrics of equality will be beauty, will be wealth, will be status, will be lineage, will be whether. So you look for women. You look for women in her family that are comparable to her, age-wise, beauty-wise, everything, And how much did they get for dowry? That is the mahar of her equals. Now you can't find this, you go out. Qabila, ashira, qabila. Even her city, you go out. You just to figure out what is the mahar of her equals. Somewhat subjective, yes. But that is what life is about most of the time. There is room for subjectivity here, but we try to get, we try to basically hit, the heart of justice as much as we can. Just we try to be as just as we can. Then the Sheikh said, وَلَوْ طَلَبَتْهُ قَبْلَ الدُّخُولِ أَنْ يَفْرِضَ لَهَا فَلَهَا ذَلِكَ فَإِنْ فَرَضَ لَهَا مَهْرَ نِسَائِهَا أو أكثر فليس لها غيره وكذلك لو فرض لها أقل منه فرضيت. If she demands that he designate a sadaq for her before the consummation, she is entitled to that. If he designates for her the sadaq of her equals for more, she is entitled to nothing more. The same is true if he designates less for her and she accepts that. Okay, now they got married, the contract is done. Now the woman, they did not get married, and the woman asked for $2 billion for Mahr. Halal? Yes, وإن أردتم استبدال زوج مكان زوج وآتيتم إحداهن قنطارا فلا تأخذوا منه شيئا أتأخذونه بهتانا وإثما مبينا. So if you want to divorce and marry another woman, don't take from the first one, and you had given the first one qintar, which is a huge amount of gold. But don't take anything back, because that will be oppression and great evil, to take anything back from the woman after you have given her her mahr. So Allah said qintaran, a huge amount of money. So if she wants $2 billion, she can ask for $2 billion as a mahr before the contract. After the contract, if she had not already asked for a mahr, then she is bound by Mahr al-Misr, the Mahr of her equals. She cannot come after the contract and say, I want $2 million. No, it is Mahr al-Misr, the Mahr of her equals. So if he offered the Mahr of her equals after the contract, she will have to take it. That is what they're saying here. If he offers the Mahr of her equals after the contract, he should have to take it. Now, she has the right to basically pause the consummation, stop consummation, or pause it if he does not give her their mahr. So, and he does not designate a mahr for her. She has the right to demand fard al-mahr, designation of the mahr, at any time. She says, designate a mahr. And if he doesn't designate a mahr, yujbar alayhi, she will take him to court, they will force him to designate a mahr. And if he fails to pay the mahr, which mahr? The mahr of her equals. If he fails to pay the mahr of her equals, she can basically say, well, I'm not proceeding. No consummation, I'm not proceeding until you pay the mahr of my equals. What if they get married already and they consummate the marriage, and then she at one point she tells him, what about the mahr? Where is the mahr? And he says, I don't have, I don't have anything. Can she then refrain from intimacy, refrain from marital relations until he surrenders the mahr? Yes, she can. She can. And he will be forced. Can she demand separation if he failed to? Yes, she can. And she will be granted that in court if he fails to pay the mahr. So the sadaq is actually a big deal. The Sheikh says, فصل وكل فرقة جاءت من المرأة قبل الدخول كإسلامها أو ارتدادها أو إرضاعها أو فسخ لعيبها أو فسخها لعيبه أو وإعساره أو فسخها لعيبه وإعساره أو عتقها يسقط بها أو يسقط به مهرها. Subsection: the sadaq is dropped in all cases where separation is caused by the woman before consummation, such as her conversion to Islam, apostasy, breastfeeding, or defect. The same applies if annulment was caused by a defect of the husband's, his lack of means, or her emancipation, her emancipation. Now, we said that if the divorce takes place before consummation, she gets 1/2, right? When does she lose that 1/2? When does she lose that 1/2? If the separation came, keep in mind, after consummation, the whole Mahr is incumbent regardless of anything. She will get her Mahr, okay? She will get her Mahr regardless of anything. Now, does he have, can he go back and make sure, if he was deceived into it, whoever deceived him, he will get the Mahr from them, not her, and so on. Unless she's the only deceiver in the whole scenario, then the Mahr may be taken back from her at the end. But in general, we're not talking here about after consummation, because after consummation, she gets the entire Mahr regardless. But before consummation, if the separation was caused by her, when is the separation caused by her? Her conversion to Islam. Should be punished for her conversion to Islam? No, this is not a punishment, but this is justice. If she converts to Islam and her husband had designated a Mahr for her and he is not Muslim, and now she cannot be his wife, it's not his problem. I mean, it's not her problem either. It's just, but it's just the fact that, justice would dictate here that she would not ask him for half of the dowry. Now, that is if they come and seek our judgment anyway. If they come and seek our judgment. Her conversion to Islam, her apostasy, the same thing. If they were both Muslims and she apostatized, then she's not entitled to half of the Mahr in this case. Breastfeeding or defect. If she breastfeeds someone of his family that makes her haram for him, then she made herself a haram for him. How could you ask him for half of the Mahr? Defect. If it was found that she has a defect that will warrant separation, and she did not tell about it prior to the contract. The revocation here is a revocation, not divorce. So when you revoke a contract, the consequences of the contract are revoked as well, except certain consequences, such as the nasab, the lineage. But when you revoke a contract, the consequences of a contract are revoked as well. The same applied if the annulment was caused by a defect of her husband's. So why is it, if he was the defective one, why is she losing half of the dowry? Because she is the one who asked for the separation because of his defect. She is the one,
Even if he doesn't tell her before?
Because consummation did not happen, so she didn't lose anything. This was just a contract, and the contract was being revoked. His lack of means, if she demanded separation because of his lack of means, then she loses, the half of the dowry. Or her emancipation, If she was a slave and he was, and she got emancipated, now she has a choice to stay with him or not, as Barira did. The Prophet ﷺ gave Barira the choice. Although the Prophet mediated for her husband, but Barira was adamant to separate. So, and Mughith loved her so much, but that sometimes happens. So what happened here? What would have happened if Mughith had not actually consummated the marriage was very they had consummated. I'm saying if they were only contracted and she got emancipated and she decided that she doesn't want him anymore, should she take half of the mahr? How come? She's the one who wants out of this marriage. She doesn't take it. So these are cases where she loses half of the mahr. And I really wish to finish the book of Sadaq today, but the time is over and I still have many rulings to cover. So if I had only a few rulings to cover, I would have borrowed like 10 or 15 minutes. But I have many rulings to cover, so I will just stop here and we will continue the book of Sadaq inshallah next week. قولوا قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.